You know what? There's a version of this conversation that starts with a gallery opening in Chelsea. White wine, white walls, and a Basquiat selling for $110 million at auction, while 100 painters who trained alongside him are waiting tables in Queens. That version is true, but it's also easy. The more interesting version starts earlier, at the moment someone decides a thing has value at all. Because capitalism didn't just change how we sell art, it changed how we see it. Let's be precise about what we mean when we say something matters in the art world. We don't mean it moves people. We don't mean it lasts. We mean it gets shown. It gets funded. It gets written about. It gets taught in schools and hung in museums and referenced in other work until it becomes part of the shared visual language of a culture. That process, the one that elevates some work and buries the rest, is not a natural phenomenon. It's an economy, and economies have rules. The first rule is this: visibility costs money. A painting sitting in someone's apartment in Detroit is, for all intents and purposes, invisible. The same painting in a gallery in New York has an entirely different life. It gets reviewed, photographed, talked about at dinner, contextualized in relation to other work that has already been decided to matter. The gallery didn't change the painting. It changed the painting's address, and address in capitalism is destiny. This is where the mechanism starts to reveal itself. Galleries are businesses. They represent artists whose work they believe they can sell, and they sell that work to people with enough disposable income to buy it. This means taste in the contemporary art market is largely shaped by a conversation happening between a very small number of dealers, collectors, and auction houses. That conversation is not secret. It's not even hidden. It's just expensive to participate in. What's more interesting is how this economic structure produces an aesthetic. Because it does. When the people buying art are primarily wealthy, the art that gets made, or at least the art that gets made and seen, tends to orbit certain preoccupations: scarcity, provenance, the cult of the individual genius, the object as investment vehicle. You end up with a market that is extraordinarily good at valuing things that are rare, attributable, and durable. You end up with a market that is extraordinarily bad at valuing things that are communal, anonymous, or ephemeral. Think about what that means for entire categories of artistic practice: folk art, street murals, textile traditions, oral storytelling, music made for ceremony rather than commerce. These are not marginal artistic traditions. Many of them are among the most sophisticated and culturally rich practices humans have ever developed, but they don't translate well into capitalism's valuation system because they resist the mechanisms capitalism uses to assign worth. You can't auction a tradition. You can't put a provenance sticker on a song that no one person wrote. What capitalism can do, and does constantly, is extract something from those traditions, strip it of its context, run it through the market machinery, and call it discovered. The blues gets absorbed into rock and roll. African masks end up in the permanent collection of MoMA, divorced from the communities that made them, reframed as proto-modernism because, that's a story that fits an existing market logic. The thing that gets called influencing or inspiring Western art was just art, full stop, before the machinery got to it. This is a part of the conversation where someone usually says, but the market democratizes too, and this is true in a narrow sense. The internet lowered the cost of distribution to near zero. Platforms like YouTube and Spotify made it possible for artists to reach audiences without gatekeepers, and that did happen. What also happened is that those platforms needed to extract value from the attention they aggregated, which meant they built algorithmic systems that functioned like a market, rewarding engagement, discouraging complexity, favoring the fast and the familiar over the slow and the strange. The gatekeepers didn't disappear. They just became code. Here's what's worth sitting with. The algorithm didn't invent this tendency. It inherited it. Capitalism has always preferred art that moves quickly, scales easily, and generates a return. The music industry figured this out in the 20th century, standardizing song length to fit radio formats, packaging artists into brands, collapsing the distance between a song and its merchandise. None of this was new. The broadsheets and penny dreadfuls of the 1800s were doing the same thing, producing culture at speed for a mass market, shaping popular taste in ways that serve commercial interests first. What changes over time is the scale and the speed. And what doesn't change is who pays the cost. The artists most consistently undervalued by capitalism's art world are not generally artists who made bad work. They are artists who were structurally excluded from the mechanisms of valuation. Women, for most of Western art history, were barred from academic training and patronage systems, and then cited as evidence that women weren't serious artists. Artists from colonized countries were looted and then told their work lacked the refinement of European traditions. Working class artists in every era have made extraordinary work that disappeared, not because it wasn't good, but because no one with capital had a reason to preserve it. The survival of art, it turns out, is not a neutral process. What we call the canon is largely what wealthy people, mostly European, mostly male, decided to keep. This is not a hot take. This is what art historians have been documenting for decades. The question is whether we're willing to let that shape how we move forward, or whether we're going to keep telling ourselves the market found the best stuff. Because here's the thing about markets. They're very good at finding things that are already valuable within the terms the market is set. They're very bad at recognizing value that operates outside those terms. A market that only understands scarcity will consistently fail to see the value of abundance. A market that only understands the individual genius will consistently fail to see the value of collective creation. This isn't a bug in the system. It's the system working as designed. What would it look like to see differently? Some of this is already happening in the margins and sometimes in the center. Public arts funding, when it exists and isn't gutted by the next administration, creates space for work that doesn't need to justify itself to a buyer. Artist residencies and fellowships do the same imperfectly. Museums that have started repatriating looted objects are, in some small way, acknowledging that the history of who gets kept is a history worth interrogating. But the deeper question isn't about policy. It's about the valuation reflex, the trained instinct in all of us who've grown up inside the system to think that what's famous is good, that what sells is significant, that what's in the museum earned its place there on the strength of the work alone. It didn't. Some of it did. A lot of it was just well positioned. The art that matters to you, personally. The song that wrecked you at 22. The novel that made you understand something you couldn't put into words before. The painting you've never seen in person, but have looked at on your phone more times than you can count. That art didn't find you through the market. Or maybe it did, partly. But the market wasn't why it landed. It landed because something in the work recognized something in you. Capitalism is very good at delivering art to audiences. It is not good at telling you which art deserves to be delivered. That distinction is worth protecting. Because once you let the market make your aesthetic judgments for you, you stop being a person with taste and become a very sophisticated consumer, which is, of course, exactly what the market is hoping for.